I value handmade things and I value, the slower pace. So, I mean, that's kind of what I want to propel out in the world because that's what I sort of value.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. Each week, I chat with artists who use print-based media to do something beyond the expected. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as episodes in Spanish with Ronaldo Gil Zambrano. Together, we speak to printmakers across the globe about their practice and passions in the world of printmaking. Hello Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, who've been offering a diverse range of high-quality products to your creative practice since 1997. Products like their new line of professional relief inks, beginning with the flagship color Super Graphic Black, developed with artist printer Bill Fick. Formulated with all the working properties artists demand, these light, fast inks roll out consistently, transfer beautifully, and clean up easily with soap and water. So if you want to take your practice to the next level, head on over to Speedball's website, where you can pick up a can of your new favorite color. There's a link in the show notes. My guest this week is Valerie Lueth, co-founder, artist, and operator of Tugboat Printshop. We talk about what it's like to run your own business and be a mom in the middle of a pandemic, finding her artistic voice, how you save your hands when making large-scale, intricate woodcuts, and what it takes to be your own advocate and salesperson as a working artist. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to carve out your place in the world with Valerie Lueth. Hi, Valerie. How's it going?
Oh, going well.
Good. I'm really happy that we can connect because I think, as I said earlier when we were off mic, you have been long on my list as someone to chat with. I really think about Tugboat as maybe one of the first online printmaking presences that I was really aware of. I mean, when I was just dipping my toes into the world of printmaking, contemporary printmaking back in 2013, 2011. And it's just really wonderful to actually get to chat with you and talk a little bit about your background and starting Tugboat and being a professional working artist woman in the world and social media and all of that good stuff. I'm really excited.
Well, I'm flattered and happy to share with you.
Wonderful. So I think a lot of people probably already know the answer to these of my listening demographic, but just on the off chance someone needs a little more introduction, would you please let me know who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Okay. Well, my name is Valerie Lueth, and I run Tugboat Printshop in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania here in Lawrenceville. I basically have just a little workshop print shop in my backyard that I run. I have an etching press, and I just make prints all the time and post a lot online and sell through my website and in events in person. And I just have always loved printmaking and always wanted to be a printmaker once I learned about printmaking, and basically just kind of knew that was my path when I first stumbled into it back in 1998 at the University of South Dakota. And basically since that time, I've just been investigating print and testing out different things with printmaking. I first started out primarily as an etcher, but around the time Tugboat started in 2006, I got into woodcut, and I've been doing that for the past 16 years now.
Yeah. And then where did you grow up, and what role did art play in that part of your life?
I grew up in South Dakota, actually, and went to college and stayed there at the University of South Dakota. But I was always very active in arts, and I think or just doing things and making things and just being sort of an activated person. I grew up on a farm in rural South Dakota, and I was always building forts and concocting plans, and my sister and I would always write plays and perform plays, and I was always coloring and drawing and just making things. And as I matured in like high school, got into photography. I was really into journalism, but throughout it all, I always was drawing. And then when I graduated, and I was like, I'm going to go to art school. I want to keep drawing.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do when I got there, and I took some drawing classes and just your run of the mill first year freshman year classes, and I ended up in my second semester. My drawing class was taught by the printmaking professor there, Lloyd Menard. And he asked me after the close of the class if I wanted to start an assistantship with him over the summer. He had kind of a group of printmakers that worked with him to help organize and set up the Frogman's workshop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, And so I stayed in Vermilion over that summer and then was able to help with that workshop, which was just tremendously influential in building me as a printmaker. I mean, just meeting and networking with so many different artists and professors of printmaking, moving presses, assembling rooms, it was an incredible experience. And I took a really long time kind of getting through my BFA. I graduated in 2004, so it was like 6 years in school. I was kind of going at my own pace. And so I just took every summer I'd be taking his workshops and we would go to printmaking, conferences. And it was just, I could feel the energy in the field and I just wanted to be a part of it.
I think that's a beautiful way of putting that, and something that definitely drew me to it as well, coming in sort of through the back door of art history, not being a printmaker myself, and then ending up in contemporary printmaking through my first real art job over at Davidson Galleries in Seattle. And that energy, as you say, of just people being excited, working together, building community, supporting each other. It was completely, intoxicating.
Definitely. And I could see the utility of the skill as well, like being able to replicate, a drawing, something you spend a lot of time making, and then just being able to make honest, authentic, duplicates of it. And that seemed very smart. Like, I'm always going to take forever making things, but if I take forever making these things, I can make more than one,
Yes. I've heard it described as you can kind of seal all your hours of labor into a block or a plate, and then you just get to revisit them whenever you need to, to pull another edition or something. It's just there. It's like this little time capsule of all the blood, sweat, and tears of art making.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that making process too. Beyond the matrix.
Yes, absolutely. And so, you said you were drawn to the community and drawn to the kind of multiplicity of the outcomes. And there's something about maybe the physicality of print as well that sort of captured your attention, being someone who sounds like you had this very eclectic art pull, for darkroom photography and journalism and installations, and just that there is that like really diverse corporeal experience that you get in printmaking. Do you think that was part of it?
Yeah. And also I think just like how perfect you can make things to some degree, like I've always been kind of a meticulous person, and like, keeping things clean, like in the finished product, was always something I cared about, but it's such a challenge in a drawing or in a, you have like messes and stuff, but making like a block or an etching, there are ways to, clean off the stuff you don't want before you make the final thing. And there's this sort of perfectionism that in the deliberate mark making, that I really gravitated towards, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Specifically, like working in woodcut, I've sort of, I almost see it like a sculpture of layers of ink, the tactile nature of the ink on the paper and layers just builds such complexity to the image that you're looking at. A lot of times my customers are sort of just blown away. Like they're so used to looking at like flat digital images, and when they see the tactile nature of ink on paper in layers, they're just like, their minds are like, what?
I could completely see that. And going out and doing these in-person events, I mean, do you find yourself kind of being a teacher a bit, or an evangelist for printmaking, when people may not even know what they're looking at?
Oh, absolutely. I love sharing what I do. And I always bring examples of, blocks. Well, usually just like one example because it's a lot to carry around and the focus is on the prints. But just to share, my process. And it really helps people understand how it was made, to see the blocks and see the ink on the blocks. And, I take a lot of photos of the work I do my making process as I'm working, just to also help, for those that might not know so much about the medium, for them to be able to grasp how the object is made.
Yeah.
I love sharing whatever I know, like people, I talk to them about whatever they want, I can go off on anything. But yeah, it's wonderful. I really enjoy talking with people. I don't always get the chance to do it. I tend to kind of hermit away and make things a lot of my time. So it's nice when I'm in person at something and I can open up and share all the technical things with others.
Yeah. Having been someone who has been, in some ways, the public face of print, working as the director of contemporary at Davidson, where it's incredible archive there. I think at one point we had, upwards of 8,000 prints just in the contemporary department alone. And people come in off the street and they sometimes really don't know what they're seeing and trying to make sense of it. And it's so good that I think you bring the blocks, because there's something about trying to describe it that you get about 3 sentences in and you can just see people kind of gloss over when it is the simple idea, especially something like woodcut, where it's there, there's no acids, there's no like chemicals at play, but there's still something about trying to do it with words that it's very difficult to land without some kind of visual for some reason. I don't know. It's a code that I've been working on, I feel like, for 10 years that I've yet to crack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not the most familiar process, I think, for a lot of people. But once they can see how it was made, it's not it's not so much a leap to get there, And I mean, I think especially with wood, people just love wood. They love carved wood and wooden things. And there's just something very warm about it. And I mean, people love to touch the block,
Oh, I bet.
touch the block, which is fine once they're printed, but
yeah. And so you have this really distinctive aesthetic. You've got these really colorful, really intricate blocks. And I'm wondering, how long did it take you to kind of develop that? Were you always interested? You said you're a meticulous person when you were doing work, at the University of South Dakota. Were you going that direction? Or when and how did you kind of find that voice?
Well, I think I had watched and helped and assisted with so many print projects throughout my time at the University of South Dakota and through just working at all these different workshops and things. So I saw so many prints get made and saw so many different prints. So I was really aware of like a lot of the possibilities. But for myself, color didn't really come into my work very much until I started doing woodcut. And I think that was because when I was an etcher, I was so focused on all of the lines, and I would just, hand stippling and then all of these different little tiny lines. But with woodcut, the mark being so much bolder, I could only go so small. And so then I just ended up having more headspace to think beyond those lines and deal with color. And I started playing with color a lot more when I started working in woodcut.
Yeah.
And now I just kind of can't stop. It's very, I go back and forth. Sometimes, like especially during the pandemic, I made some more black and white pieces, more because of time. I have 2 kids, and it was difficult to orchestrate larger color pieces during that time. But I really enjoy working with color and what it can evoke in a piece. But it's sort of whatever the subject of the work is, kind of the sentiment that I want to kind of pull forth. I try to select colors based on what I hope for in that department, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think with that really intricate tactile blocks that you make, and then when you mix those, as I think you often do, with real bright, vibrant colors, it really makes for like quite an experience, I imagine. And like, I'm sure very sort of head turning for the people who come by your booth or your stall or wherever you are, because it is this look that you don't really see other ways, and of course really couldn't be achieved through other media, I don't think. It's that kind of graphicness mixed with like powerful colors. You could do it maybe, but it would take a lot longer. There'd be no purpose of doing it with anything other than woodcut. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where I seem to put all my energy now. So I like to explore all the possibilities. It's a slow process though. So, I go at the rate that I can go at.
Yeah. Yeah. And that maybe kind of leads in well to my next question, which is, what are your best practices that you can share with our people and, particularly maybe even young artists out there for saving your hands and your joints when you're doing such intricate and quite large scale blocks?
Well, I'm still kind of trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
I don't tend, I kind of work in spurts. Like I'll spend, 4 or 5 hours carving intensely and then switch to another thing. Or, I kind of have my days worked out to where I'm not usually doing one task all the day long. So my hands kind of get different. I mean, I'm usually using my hands with every single task, but in a different way throughout the day. Carving versus printing, rolling inks, or, typing on a computer or drawing on a block. Each sort of requires different muscles to be used. But, and then there's finger exercises you can do to stretch your fingers out if they get sore while you're carving. I tend to use Band-Aids, but not because I'm cutting myself, but just to sort of cushion my joint, parts of my hands that hold my tools tightly, because I tend to hold my tools really tightly when I'm carving, and then they kind of cut into my hand if I don't have a little bit of a barrier between them and my skin. So I'll use Band-Aids to sort of protect my from deep indentations.
Yeah, I can picture that for sure. Even just from my little experience carving just lino cuts, I can picture, those red and kind of purple indentations that can happen in the fingers. Yeah. Yeah. It's, when I was first, one of my only prints I've ever made was just a lino cut. And I was at a studio where my husband was working at the time, and I'd drawn it out and I was carving it, and he's done really large scale woodcuts as well, and that are quite detailed. And so I was asking him okay, how do I hold this and what do I do this? And at one point I said, and how do I keep my back from hurting? And he said, well, when you figure that out, you tell the rest of us,
Well, with larger scale pieces, it's hard because you got to kind of find the leverage to get a good cut, but then you're working across this giant surface. And sometimes I'm working vertically, and sometimes I have it flat on a table, and it kind of just depends on what area, I'm singled in on at the moment. But try to rotate around a little bit, because it definitely does start to. Your back starts to hurt, your hands start to hurt. Yeah. It's a no pain, no gain kind of situation,
Yeah, absolutely. I think, woodcut, especially large scale woodcut, it's so physical. And, something that I think you just need to, sounds like, listen to your body. If your block needs to be up that day, put it up that day. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, different cuts, they're easier to make from different directions and stuff too. So sometimes I'll make all the cuts in one direction and then switch aside, rotate and then make cuts in that, from that same direction, but in a different spot, rotating the block so that, I don't have to move, it moves,
Yeah. Yeah. So when and why did you decide to start your own shop?
Well, I always knew I was going to, I always kind of intended to be just an artist. I never really thought about going, I didn't go to grad school because I didn't want to be a professor. I knew I wanted to be making work, and that was where I was sort of destined to be. I did get a job right after I graduated from the University of South Dakota, doing, what was it even called? Concept art for this educational video game company.
Oh, wow.
I learned a lot about, working and drawing in Photoshop and doing a lot of digital kind of technology stuff, which I had not done any of before I started stuff. But after, that kind of provided me with some resources to be able to purchase a press and the equipment that would be necessary to be able to have one's own print shop. And once I kind of had that, then it just made sense to be, to label it and begin, as a business. So that's sort of, I was always making prints and selling them in the gallery and trying to find ways to get prints in front of people before that as well. But once I actually had a press and, knew that was something I was able to do all the time, like that was when kind of cut the cord with the other place and dove in and decided to be Tugboat Printshop.
And so was Tugboat originally in South Dakota and then in Pittsburgh then?
Well, yeah. Tugboat was started by Paul Roden and I, and Paul had a gallery in South Dakota that he started when he was a grad student called the Tugboat.
I wondered why Tugboat. I was curious about that.
A lot of people do, but I think when we were kind of coming up with ideas behind, what would our print shop be, we really liked this idea of like the small thing kind of working towards something big.
Mm-hmm.
So the Tugboat sort of, we lived in river cities, beside rivers, and we liked the idea of like the little engine kind of. So the Tugboat seemed appropriate to keep as a icon for ourselves.
Yeah.
And since then we've both kind of gone different ways. Paul's become more of a painter, and I'm still, making prints as Tugboat. But we worked together in those early years of developing the business, and we did a lot. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I've always just really, really liked tugboats. I grew up on the Puget Sound, and so you see, just these really charming little vessels doing this incredible work. And so I always got that feeling from the shop, just because I already have that like emotional impression of tugboats for sure.
Yeah. It's a pleasant little thought, the Tugboat.
Yeah, they're just unassuming and hardworking, and and just very pleasing. So that makes a lot of sense. And so it eventually moved to Pittsburgh. And so how was that for a transition? I think I've driven through South Dakota. I've been in North Dakota. So I know a bit of that kind of feeling of that space and that openness. And then all of a sudden you're in Pittsburgh, this very industrial, very urban place. What was that transition like?
Well, we actually had moved from South Dakota to Nashville first, and then from Nashville up to Pittsburgh. And it was harder for me, the transition between South Dakota and Nashville, honestly, because I just needed winter. I wanted like a climate that had a cold period where you could just burrow away and do your things, because that's what I was used to, like having all the time. So Pittsburgh definitely held that, and it's also such a blue collar place.
Yeah.
It felt very Midwestern, and I felt very at home here, and still do. I'm definitely not, like, people are always like, where are you from? And I'm like, I have lived here for 16 years. But I clearly give off of a different kind of vibe. So, I definitely consider myself a Pittsburgher now, but I don't know all the subtleties of the region. So I love it here. It's great. It's not a giant city, but it's topographically extremely interesting to me. And I love all the old architecture. And part of when I lived in South Dakota, I always lived in towns, but close to the main street of town where all the little businesses were. So I could walk easily to the bank or to the post office. Right. And I was always a big walker or biker. And I really, after living in Nashville where everything was far away, I realized that is something I need. I want to be able to walk to everything I want to go to. I don't want to have to get in a car. I don't want to have to take all this extra time to do all of these different tasks. So Pittsburgh was the neighborhood that I now live in Lawrenceville. It's just so walkable. All the houses are really close together. All of these things are very accessible. And for me, that creates the perfect living environment. So I'm happy here.
Yeah. I definitely understand that. And, being someone who myself, I've lived in many different cities, at least like 7 that I can think of off the top of my head right now, that you really do develop that taste of like, okay, like what do I need to be living my best and truest life? And we're so fortunate that the US is so incredibly diverse, and we can find almost anything under the sun that you'd like, in terms of, what you can value in your city, in your living arrangement. Yeah, definitely.
I like being able to walk down the hill with all my packages and just go to the little post office and drop them off. That's nice.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's really nice. I love that image that you said about like winter being this time where you can burrow away and get work done. And I having lived in very warm climates and also cold and rainy climates as well. And now I'm in Santa Fe in the middle of winter, which is maybe the first like kind of proper, like closest to proper winter I've ever lived in, where, it's consistently freezing. And once the snow falls, it stays on the ground. I've never had that before. Because in Seattle, you get you have 2 inches of snow, and then the next day it rains and it goes away, so it's very, very mild there.
It kind of does that in Pittsburgh a little bit too.
Yeah?
But it's not a super cold. It's actually extremely mild winter, in my opinion.
I'm sure, comparatively.
That's pretty great too. It feels like kind of tropical winter in comparison, but I think it's just like that time period where things just feel a little bit slower and it gets cold and like not as many people are out and about, and there's just a slower pace to the way things get done a little.
Yeah. And when I've been in tropical or subtropical cities like Sydney or Bangkok, I feel like there is almost this pressure that you should be out. It's nice. Like I feel that.
Yeah.
You're wasting this evening. Yeah.
Like, sigh, I could go to work. Oh yeah. There's no expectation of me to go have fun.
Yeah. I think I'm really going to take that forward in my first like proper cold winter that I'm going into, not just visiting. Like, I've been to conferences in Chicago in February or the Netherlands in January, but that's only been for a week. Like this is my chance to burrow properly and really feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have fun with it.
Yeah. I love it. And so once you were in Pittsburgh and you're doing Tugboat like pretty much kind of full time, it sounds like. You're making a lot of work, and of course you've got your online presence, social media, you have a website, you sell work through it. And I guess all of that, and I've experienced this in just a little bit with what I do for the podcast, can feel sort of like you're never not working. When you're doing something creative, that you're also the documenter and the promoter and the shipper and the,
Sure.
Do you find that? Does it bother you? Do you find you need to make space when you're not, Valerie Tugboat, and you can be, Valerie Mom and that kind of thing?
Well, I think I've sort of like, I've come up with a good balance over the years. It hasn't always been the easiest, but I think that when I've realized things are becoming too hectic for myself, or, I'm overwhelmed by the way something is working, I try to take a look at it and simplify it, or, streamline it so that it's easier, or, I just I can usually see what the problem area is and be able to address it, But I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty much always working in some sense.
Yeah.
It's my nature, so I'm not dissatisfied by that. And I would be bored if I was always doing the same thing. So I like being able to do all of the different parts. I mean, there might be a day when I decide, I don't, but it all feels sort of tied together, when I'm explaining what I'm working on, or I'm taking pictures of it. Like those are all things I really enjoy doing and have enjoyed doing for, a lot of my life. And it sort of brings out these other interests, that I have, and weaves them together with my art interests. And so I'm satisfying a lot of different things, that I'm compelled to do.
Yeah.
Within the one framework.
I'm wondering if maybe you were able to have a quick learning curve or something with the this self-promotion that working artists need to do because you had the background in photography and then also, photojournalism, which of course is, show me what's happening, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I definitely think that my experience with those things in the past has informed my ability to be more proficient at it in my business, And as I activated those different parts within the business, they weren't not every single thing came all at once, sort of, oh yeah, I can do this. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that too. And then, I could weave that with that. But, I've gotten better at it too, like the more that I do it. So I don't waste as much time thinking about it. I kind of have developed a system with how I like to talk to my audience or like to share with people. And that makes it easier for me to do too. But it's not something that I really struggle too much with because I enjoy doing it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that makes the longevity of the practice so much easier when it's fulfilling. And it's necessarily doesn't feel like you're white knuckling your way through every element of it. Yeah. In terms of either the self-promotion and going through Instagram, I feel like, and this might just be like my arc, but was Tugboat kind of an early adopter of social media as a way to promote what you were doing? Is that your perception at all? I feel like it's mine. That's why I say that.
Possibly. I mean, I think maybe the documenting of process as like a large component of sharing could be said to be something, because I don't really feel like I saw very many people sharing that information with others. And I think it's pretty important when you're trying to sell a print, for people to understand the work that goes into it, in my opinion, so it always seemed very like a natural thing to be able to share, like, well, I don't have this finished thing to show you, but this is what I'm doing, and it's interesting too. So, it helps you see this whole process a little bit better, and, for those that are interested in looking and wanting to know more, it's there, it's not like you have to sign on and be a follower and watch it all happen. If it's not interesting, then you just don't follow, right?
Yeah. Well, and woodblocks themselves are such beautiful objects.
They really are.
They're really, really great. And I, through the promotion that I do for the podcast, on the Hello Print from Instagram, I repost works that I find to be really interesting. And I find so often those are woodcuts because they're just gorgeous objects.
Yeah.
And then there's just something so satisfying and more magical about seeing that print come off of it in this way that's really satisfying, where I love litho. I have highest respect for lithographers, but it's just sort of like it's so different to see like a completed drawing flat on a stone, and then it comes up and it's like, well, that's your drawing's transferred. It's like it has a different. There's a drama maybe about woodcut that really makes it kind of perfect for a medium like Instagram.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of hocus pocus you could share with litho though too.
That's true.
Smoothing of. I mean, there's just so much stuff. Just like any printmaking, there's so many tactile moments in the making that are just there to be documented if one wanted to or was doing. But I mean, it's probably like how you spin it,
Yeah. Do you find that you need to kind of mind your mental health at all around social media? Having a big following on it, and then also, being someone who posts regularly. Is that stressful for you? I mean, I've talked to some people who really feel that pressure around Instagram and, you got to feed the beast, kind of a feeling for it. Is that something you've balanced with, or does it just kind of seem very natural?
Well, I mean, I kind of just feel like the people who are, if you're following me there, you want to see what I'm making. And if I'm making something, I'm sharing it. And, I don't really put a lot of pictures of like my kids or my life outside of printmaking on there. It sort of has become more of a, like my work with my business kind of page. And like, so that, like I try to maintain a certain amount of privacy for with my personal life. But if it's work related and I think it seems interesting, I'll share it. And I try not to get too worried about, what people think or whatever, because it's just, I had this thing, I shared it, whatever happens to it from there. Like, I guess, if you're going to say, I mean, people are pretty respectful. I haven't had any really challenge anything. And I mean, I'm probably not always the best at my response times, or like, I don't always respond to every single comment or whatever. I don't always have time to do that much, but I feel like at least I can put the pictures out there, or like put the information out there for whatever I'm working on. And it's kind of more of a way for me to feel like I'm updating people who would be interested in what I'm making, and the fact that I continue to get followers is awesome.
Yeah.
But I try not to think about that, or I don't really do a lot of promotional things with, or spend money to advertise. I just create content. I think if you're making something interesting and you're putting something interesting out there, I mean, especially as an artist, I mean, you're in charge of your content. You can create your own personal content that you have control over, and that's a very valuable thing to be able to do.
Yeah, that sounds very, very healthy. I think sometimes I talk to artists out there who, they really they're like, well, why did this one only get so many engagements and this one, and it's just like you'll just drive yourself mad, truly, if you try and do it. And it sounds like, your attitude of like, look, no one's making anyone follow Tugboat. Either they want to be there or they don't. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's other ways that people connect with me too. I have a mailing list, and I have, I go do shows in person and stuff, so I don't put everything into that one thing too. I can't make Instagram my God, there's just people like to connect in different ways. And so I probably post there most often, but just because I have the largest following there, but I put an equal amount of investment into the other areas. And I mean, just having a whole bunch of likes on something doesn't mean you're necessarily selling it, It's just, it is what it is. It's a nice tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that relationship between, selling your work, which you want to do as a working artist, and kind of chasing the numbers of Instagram, as you say, it's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation as well. And I think people get really caught up in the size of an audience and less focused on like getting the audience that they want. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like number one thing in running the business is finding people who want and appreciate the work that you do, and cultivating a relationship with those people that are interested in what you're making. And that's one, all the different social medias offer, a different reach to a kind of different audiences. People prefer one over the other, so I don't know, I kind of dabble a little bit in some of them. I just definitely do not do all of them. I do not have time for it, but I know that I like to take pictures to document my work. I know that I like to, write little bits about it here and there. And I know what I can kind of handle and manage alongside the other things that I do in life. And so I continue to do those things. And that's where I'm able to put my energy,
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned a couple of times about being a mom as well as an artist, and I want you to, if you'd like, I know you said that you're a little understandably private about home life and all that, but maybe just kind of in a general way, speak to the experience of being a creative and a mom, and because I think a lot of people, they can get maybe a little bit anxious about having kids and thinking like, well, am I going to have any energy to make my work anymore? And of course, moms have this whole extra added, complexity around paid time off versus not paid time off and all of that. And I often find it really interesting to hear how artists sort of interact with the creativity of raising small humans with the creativity of creating work. And what is that like for you?
Well, let's see. I think that, it's wonderful to have children. Mm-hmm. They bring just so much, they bring so much, they bring me a lot of energy, actually. I mean, they wear me out sometimes, but I'm so sparked by the things that they get interested in, and they're, appreciation for just so much. And it really reshapes the way that I think about certain things sometimes. So I appreciate that in my kids. I think like I definitely don't have as much time to work as when I didn't have children, but having children has made me much more aware of the time that I do have, and I tend to be more deliberate with my time as a result of having children. So I know that I have to get things done by a certain time, or, I keep myself to timelines a little bit better. Because I know I want to be able to spend time with them, and I know that I have to get certain things done for my work. And so it's been certainly a lot of figuring these things out through the years. But now that my kids are a little bit older, it's kind of easier. They go to school, and I get the daytime when they're at school now. So, every day. So that's great. So there are certainly some years there where it was a little more challenging to get work done. But I think that also is part of why I've chosen to have my print shop, in my backyard in a studio versus like having a storefront as well, just because then in the evenings, when they're sleeping, I'm able to go out and continue my projects, and I don't feel like I'm, I don't have to get a babysitter, be far away, or, I kind of built my life to have it, to try to serve all of the different facets of it, and make the best of with my time.
Right. Yeah.
That's my time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it does take a long time to make things,
And make tiny humans, I've heard,
But they're so creative and interesting too, so a lot of times we'll be making things together, and they're becoming more and more comfortable with coming out to my studio and like working on things in my studio while I'm working on things in my studio. So I think as they age, we'll get into more of that too. They're pretty artistic little beings.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're someone who has been working in the arts and monetizing artistic practice and being your own promotional person. And then we had this kind of wacky pandemic happen. And, you were already working from home, but it sounds like obviously it changed when your kids were staying home for school, which I know happened to many parents. But how was that time period for you as someone who, was kind of used to having these lengths of time to dedicate to your creative practice, and then suddenly life changed? Yeah.
Well, I had to do some evaluating on like what, I would have goals in my head of like what I wanted to do pre-pandemic. And then I had to kind of rearrange those and think up projects that I would be able to manage, So I was working smaller, one color pieces for a while, just because that's what I could do alongside working and helping them at home. But, I still was able to make work, and it didn't feel, I wasn't like, I was itching for the opportunity to be able to work on things that were big again, or things that were a little more complicated again. But I just tried to make the best of the time that I had, and it worked all right. I mean, there were definitely some stressful moments throughout it, but we all worked together to try to make it work.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
trying to think back, I mean, it feels kind of distant, but it really wasn't. And now it's sort of like coming back a little bit. So I don't know. And like with their father, we kind of share time with the kids. And so sometimes my kids would be with him as well, so the days when my kids were with him, then I would have more free time, and vice versa for him. So we kind of work together to sort of like be able to allow ourselves creative time independent of and throughout that time period as well, which was very good,
Yeah. Yeah.
If we hadn't been able to work together nicely like that, I mean, it would have been a little bit more of a challenge, but we could count on at least a couple days a week of solid work time between,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so do you think that you'd, encourage your kids to go into creative arts and follow your path? I know I've talked to some people who are like, no, I want them to be lawyers, like don't do what I did. But do you think that you would encourage them to to do kind of something similar?
I think that if they have the inclination, absolutely. I think that they can see it all happening around them. So if they decide that that's what they want for themselves, they go after it, And my daughter has all sorts of things, that she wants to be, and she's trying to figure that out. And I'm trying to lead her, in all these different, help her find the thing that she connects with and experiment with different possibilities. And it's always there for her if she wants help doing something like that. I'm certainly willing to share what I know and help hold her hand and her starting something similar or carrying on the torch if she wants to.
Yeah, second generation tugboats. Yeah.
But I think it will be up to them to decide. I'll be supportive of them of whatever they decide they want to do. But I think they've been able to witness, and with two parents that are artists and running their own businesses, they see what's involved and they see what I do, and they're very astute and ask questions, and they like to run their own little businesses. Like they set up, I live on Main Street, and it's a pretty busy street. So there's a lot of street walking traffic, and they'll set up their lemonade stands and they set up an art stand, and they make one day they made $60.
Oh my God.
Art. My daughter sell earrings, and they're always coming up with plans to make and sell things. So maybe it is in their future. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like definitely that. Their parents' children, right?
Exactly. But
yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I loved to do when I was a kid too. So, maybe that's what you have that inclination towards, getting your goods in front of people and sharing it. And
yeah. I say it's always an interesting question. I always never know what to ask. If you could give yourself advice, for starting a shop, or if to ask it as, what advice would you give young printmakers who want to do what you do? Because I think a lot of artists, and we have a lot of students who listen to the podcast, that would be an end ambition, be able to have a business based around their art and promote it and sell it and, have a life based in making and living. And, what would you tell them? Or if it makes more sense to frame it as what would you tell young Valerie about it? Just kind of words of wisdom as someone who's been doing it for some time.
Well, I think as any small business owner, you have to be able to really talk or greet with your customers, and that's a very necessary skill. So I've talked to artists and younger students in schools and stuff before on the subject. And, I sort of say, if it's your inclination to want to do those kinds of things, then you probably have what it takes to run your own business. But if it's something that you hesitate to do and it might not be your strongest skill, maybe you should be working with a gallery or someone else who can talk on behalf, because you really have to be able to feel confident in what you're saying and what you're selling to have success, So I would say, and it's a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
And wearing a lot of different hats. And if you're the kind of personality, that can handle a lot of different things and it doesn't bother you at all and you like it and you're challenged by it, then I say, yeah, it's for you. That kind of stuff stresses you out, There's probably still a way to do it, but, you got to think about what your strong suits are and roll with those,
Yeah. And I think some people really want to live a life where their work and their life is very separate, where they just, they punch the clock and then they work and then they punch the clock 8 hours later and they don't work. And that's really, really appealing to some people. And I've known people who have lived that sort of straight job life very happily. And then there's, as we've said, that kind of never not working, it can either drain you or it can fill your cup and make you feel like you are living a successful, wonderful life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because, there's so many, with running a bit, there's just so many things you can be thinking about at any moment, But I try to make sure that I devote time to be thinking about what I want to be making primarily, that's why I started doing what I do. And that's why I want to be doing what I do, is because of the work, the artwork, making prints. And I try to keep that the focal point. So when something else starts to feel like it's taking over, if I'm writing too many emails or, something is just taking too much of my energy and I'm not feeling very connected to my craft, then I back up a little bit and I say, hey, what can I do here? Because I need to have my focus be on this, So sometimes I have to dial certain things back to keep a balance for myself, Tugboat first started out, we were like making T-shirts and doing wedding invitations and all these different things, to try to make money and, fund the business and fund our lives. And over the years, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. You just kind of strip back what doesn't work and what isn't, like as you are able to, in your, like sometimes when you're first starting out, you have to take on everything, or you take on everything you can. But then as you get going and you're able to like choose a little bit more, be more selective, you should be, so that you can keep your focus on what you want it to be focused on.
Yeah, I feel like that's really strong advice because, I mean, at least I know for me, I can get kind of tangled up in the like, I have to do everything and I have to do everything perfectly, otherwise everything will fall apart. And then not recognize that like maybe I've actually been able to build up an aspect of this for it to stand on its own. But, it's that metaphor, right, of the vines where you need to like have a grasp on the next vine, but then you are allowed to let go of the one behind you. But yeah.
I don't know. I try to make it clear that I'm a person throughout, like all the message, like I am a person making art, I can't do everything, like, but I'm doing what I am, what I'm doing, but like, I'm just one person, what I mean?
Yeah. And I imagine that people might respond to that, understanding that they're not ordering something off of Amazon.
Right.
There's plenty of, offset lithographs of trees out on Amazon if you wanted to go buy one, that's an option, but that's not what they're doing. The fact that you are saying I'm a real person, I mean, that's got to connect with people. And I would imagine it would connect with me. It would work on me. Yeah.
I value that.
Yeah.
So, I value handmade things and I value, the slower pace. So, I mean, that's kind of what I want to propel out in the world because that's what I sort of value,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To wrap up, I would love it if you could just let people know where they can find you, where they can find Tugboat, where they can see your work, and how to get in touch if you want people getting in touch.
All my available works are in my online shop at tugboatprintshop.com. I also have an Etsy store where I list prints. Some of them that in my Etsy store are maybe rarer prints or prints that have very few copies left. And if you're local to Pittsburgh, I do studio visits. So if you want to get in touch, I have a submission form on my website. You can write me a note if you'd like to visit locally. And I'm not always able to make a commitment to that. Usually you have to get in touch at least 24 hours beforehand to set up a time. Because I do have kids and stuff, but I like to be able to invite people into my space and show them what I do. If people want to be able to shop in person or bring a class in or something like that, I'm available for that to some degree, depending on the level of pandemic we're in. And and I do in-person events occasionally. I list those on my website. So if you want to come see me, like out tabling at an event or something, those are usually listed on my website. And same with exhibitions, where my prints are included. They usually are listed on the calendar on my website.
Great. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Valerie, for taking the time to chat with me. And I'm just really excited to share your story and share your prints with our audience.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Miranda. It was fun.
Well, that's our show for this week. If you like this episode and you want to support it, you can certainly find us over on Patreon. You get exclusive merch and access to bonus content. Join me again next week when my guest will be John Hitchcock. We talk about his early childhood influences, learning about color and perspective in his grandmother's rose garden, how he developed his distinctive style and how it intersects with his musical mind, his exciting multimedia exhibition at the Portland Art Museum last year, and if he just happens to be Hello Print Friend's first ever musical guest. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.